Hello, friends. I am here with my friend Jeff Cook. I don't know if you know this, Jeff, but I actually have two friends named Jeff Cook who live in Colorado. So, and I knew him longer than you. But we so. Do you remember how we met? I'm going to tell the story, but do you remember? Through
I know that we started a conversation through the book you did with Chan. That's
Yeah.
that's my best recollection. Go ahead though.
Okay, so you were blogging on the Doctrine of Hell, advocating for annihilation view of hell on Scott McKnight's
Yep.
blog. I think you did like a 3-part series.
Yeah.
Somehow this is like when I first even started to even know what a blog was and like social media, and somehow I came across like, oh, Jeff Cook is working through erasing hell and all this stuff, and I jumped on. Long story short, at the time I didn't agree with you.
Right.
But
Come on.
but it was through reading your view of hell. I mean, advocating for annihilation and offering some, I think, helpful, really humanizing critiques of the book that Chan and I wrote, that started me on a journey, where I ended
Yeah.
up now. Now we're on the same page with hell. Assuming you still are there, or have you shifted at all?
I
Or
I am. I haven't done any work on hell since that.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
um, but yeah, you may be the only person that actually read my book on that, which was everything new. Which
Such a
makes me
good
laugh. So
book. Yeah.
if the Lord Jesus wanted to speak to you through
Yeah.
that 2 years of worth of work that I did, and you were the one.
It's so weird how, I mean, you're a really good writer, great thinker, pastor. That book is a really good book, and I not just blowing smoke, like, and yeah, you said it's like sold hardly like nothing, and it was put out by Zondervan, right? Like a big publisher.
It got bought by Zondervan. It did not get put out by
Oh,
Zondervan.
okay. Yeah.
I got a handful of us got cut all at the same time. Another author at the time was writing on hell for Zondervan and also got cut,
Oh
and later
wow.
appeared on the Times 100 most influential people list.
Who is that?
That would be one Robert Bell.
Oh. I didn't catch the illusion. um.
No, we were they needed to figure out who they wanted to be as a publishing house, and
Yeah.
I think writing books that were questioning some of the stuff that we were questioning at that time
Yeah.
wasn't where they wanted to go. So
Okay. Okay.
so we moved on.
We're not talking about hell today. I don't think maybe we could, but I'm probably not really interested in doing that. But you reached out to me because I mentioned something. I think it was on a podcast or posted something about the Enneagram. You're
Yeah.
what very knowledgeable of the Enneagram. Are you certified or anything official, or you just like know it and use it?
No, I've been I got real into the Enneagram about 4 or 5 years ago. I teach philosophy at the University of Northern Colorado. And the idea of motive in our thinking about ourselves, thinking about how we behave, that became real interesting to me. And so I've just really invested a lot of myself in the last few years into Enneagram. And I love, obviously, since I'm a pastor and I love the Bible, the overlap there is something I geek out on.
Okay.
And your tweet just gave me an excuse to say, man, I would love to talk to somebody who knows about hermeneutics
Okay.
and has actually done real study into the writers of the scripture about this. So this is like fresh material for me.
Okay.
But I've always wanted to talk shop about Bible writer types.
So we are talking shop. We are thinking out loud. We're not writing anything in stone, but it is interesting. I think my tweet
Yeah.
said something like, I think most of the psalmists were Enneagram 4s. Very, very creative, artistic. Maybe some, and I don't know much about the Enneagram, so if I say anything, just please correct me. I won't be offended at all. But like,
Yeah.
in
Good.
Enneagram 4 could have lots of highs and lows. Maybe an unhealthy 4 would be maybe manic depressive. Would that be accurate to say, like in the most unhealthy place? Or
Yeah. Unhealthy fours will come across as very envious and kind of real consumed with themselves. That could be two of the signs of unhealth.
You said come across, which makes you think that might not be an accurate assessment, but just more how they're portrayed. Is that?
Yeah. So one of the things about Enneagram is Enneagram isn't about how the world sees you. It's about how you see the world, which is where typing can become kind of tricky, especially for people who are not in the room, because what you're doing is guessing how they see the world based on their behavior.
Interesting.
So if you were wearing green glasses and I was wearing blue glasses, and we both knew about the other colors, and we were saying, and we started asking each other, well, how do you see this? How do I see this? That's more what the Enneagram's like. It's how do you see the world? So we come to the world and experience the world, but some of us experience kind of a filter of fear. Some of us have a filter of shame. Some of us have a filter of anger in the way that the world strikes us, in the way that we interpret the things out there. Enneagram goes in, the big idea for those not familiar is that there's this system called the Enneagram just wants to say something to the extent of there's really just 9 types of big things that everybody wants. Everybody could probably get categorized into wanting one of 9 big things. And those big things are we want to be good. We want to be loved. We want to be to excel. We want to be unique. We want to be knowledgeable. We want to be safe. We want to be on an adventure. We want to be in control and strong, or we want to be at peace. And that at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, we have to make a big decision. One of those motives will come out more than all the others.
Okay.
And it affects how we see the world.
I've always wondered where did it come from? Do we know? Is it because it dates?
Yeah.
The origins go way back, right? Of the Enneagram.
I like thinking about the Enneagram like music. If you look at music theory, you discover that there are 12 notes. Those 12 notes have been there.
Okay.
The way that the way that reality is structured, those notes are discovered across cultures. And what ended up happening with Enneagram is you see it emerging and being discovered in very different cultures at very different points in time. It's one of the reasons I think it pings for me as true. So you'll see it in South America, but you'll also see it in Homer, and you'll see it in references in the early Christian church when they start doing work on virtue and the deadly sins. And it just begins to show its face everywhere.
How do you see it in Homer? Like what? Because obviously he's not saying I'm an Enneagram 4 or whatever. Like what what aspect of the Enneagram is in Homer, right? Or the early church?
I need to look at that more, but I've heard tell from Chris Heuritz that who's a thinker on this, that the adventures of Homer break down into 9 different adventures, and each of them correspond very cleanly to each of the Enneagram types.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get into the biblical authors, the Enneagram, and how this could possibly help us understand and even interpret biblical authors. Before we did that, you promised that you were going to help me to discover my own Enneagram type. So here on Theology in the Raw Live, I have tried to take a few tests. The last time I tried, and apparently it was a really good test. It was a lengthy one. I couldn't get through it because I felt like I wanted to say none of the above to the 2 binary questions that were thrown at me. Also, I've taken enough personality tests that I know the personality they're searching for. So it's like domineering, versus passive aggressive or whatever it is, and the question I'm like, I already know what they're trying to ask. So I'm already feel like I can't, I'm already tempted to give an answer that, of what I maybe want to be and not what I really am. And I'm like, most of these 2 questions I get, are you this or that? I'm like, well, I'm neither of them. Like, if those are 2 options, I'm just going to say neither. So it's hard for me to finish this test, which may even give evidence for my Enneagram type that I resist binaries. I don't know.
Well, let's put that on the side. I would love to come back to why do you resist binaries once we get into this. But it is the case for those listening. Tests often are wrong about 60% of the time. It really is the case. A lot of folks who get into Enneagram want to say it's best just to talk to people who've really been familiar with the system for a little while.
Oh, really? So
Sometimes
that's not abnormal.
tests work.
Okay.
No, it's really common for a test to get it wrong. And one of the things that I have noticed is Enneagram's not a quick fix. It's one of those things you really have to dive into. But when you do, for me, it has, I have an autistic child. My wife and I are very different. I have our youngest is a very withdrawn personality, and the Enneagram has just been gold for us in terms of understanding where everyone's coming from and meeting them in what they need most. So my autistic child doesn't want to be controlled, and that is a primary. But they also never do what we ask them to do because they don't want to be controlled. And being able to navigate how they see the world and what they want has been really essential for us in having a healthy relationship and having a peaceful home. My wife is a type that longs to be praised. I am a type that would naturally think, well, that's selfish, that's real self-aggrandizing. But her motive comes out of this place where she wants to get the attention of others, and that's a primary for her. So if I know that that's just who she is and not some, personality defect, that can be real helpful for us. Whereas my type wants to be right. And so I'll argue things to the nth degree, and that can be healthy and unhealthy, but it's because I don't want to be corrupted in my thinking. And that's a primary for me. And she meets me in those places. This is where this is healthy. This is where this is unhealthy. Anyway. Okay. But let's talk about you.
Okay. Go for it.
A first question would be how you get things that you want. Are you the sort of person who is aggressive about getting things that you want? Like you come out demanding them? Are you the sort of person that withdraws to get the things that you want? You feel comfortable taking a big step back? Or when you walk into a room, are you looking to say, who can I help in this space? Because I can earn the thing that I want. So demand, earn, withdraw.
Ooh, see, that's tough. Not demand.
Okay.
Let me think through this. There's certain things I want to get that I get what I want, but I don't like is it better if I kind of just talk through it rather than say?
Yeah. Yep.
So, I'm the type of person that I can lead. I don't love to lead. Definitely don't need to lead. I would get frustrated in a room if everybody's sitting around and there's no direction. It's like, well, hey, what's going on here? But I don't need to come in and command attention or demand something. I'm competitive with myself, but I don't, like, if I'm playing basketball and somebody's really aggressive and needs to win, I'll just let them win. I'm like, I'm totally fine losing a basketball game, losing anything really. If somebody else really needs to do it. So, and I don't get none of my identities wrapped up into that, but I am very competitive with myself. I feel like if I go on a run, I can care less if I'm running faster than the next person, but I want to get better than my last time, and you can replicate that throughout many different areas of my life.
Do you feel a strong motive to improve yourself?
For the most part, yes.
Are you really aware of your diet?
Yes. Yeah,
are you really aware?
The older I get, the more I'm like, man, it's so easy to put on weight and to get out of shape, and it's like, oh man, so I work extra hard to diet well, to whatever. But I also have this pleasure impulse too, and this kills me when I travel. Like when I travel, I probably eat like the worst, just fried everything, whatever. But then I get back and I'm like, I feel guilty, and I'm like, all right, nothing but salads for a week, So I do have. I'm not like an ascetic. Like I do like the pleasures of life. I do like comfort naturally. I do love good food and everything, but then it's this constant battle of like improving myself and yet giving into my pleasures,
Sure.
Does that help?
Do you find it certainly does.
Okay.
Do you find that you experience more anger or fear?
Of those two options, here we go.
Yeah.
I
Or shame.
shame.
Would you let me back up?
Mm.
I'm going too quickly.
No, it's good.
If do you find that you experience anger, fear, or shame more as kind of an underlying feeling?
I want to say shame. I might need to tease that out. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not angered very easily, and yet, like for instance, when I played baseball back in the day, and this comes with a self-competitive thing, when I didn't do well, I was a volcano of anger, but only on myself. Like I would literally go and take the baseball helmet, like if I struck out, and just be smashing it over my head. Like I even one time I went hog wild in a little porta potty bathroom. I got out, people were like, "What in the world happened?" So I wasn't angry at anybody else, just myself, because I didn't hit the ball a mile. You know, I might have gotten a hit, but it wasn't like a good hit, so I got really angry at myself. But with other people, I rarely get angry at situations, other people. Like I just don't understand the people that are just always flying off the handle. Like I don't. Most people who know me, I'm almost positive to say I've never seen you angry. Like, well, crack open my heart. There's more anger there than you think, but it's definitely not a.
Could it be that your anger is directed inward at yourself?
Yes.
For example, do you find that you will replay conversations in your mind about what you could have done better?
So last night I was up for 3 hours in the middle of the night because I gave a webinar last night on sexuality with a lot of Q&A, and I was reflecting on the answers I gave, and I was like almost like freaking out, like, oh, that wasn't accurate, that was misleading, or did I really say that? Like I don't think that's like that could be. I literally was up from like 3 until 5 in the morning. Could not. I mean, was just wide awake, and I kept getting these cold sweats of like. It was more like. So maybe it is a shame because part of me is like, what are people going to think of me? Did they think that was too liberal or too conservative, or are they going to tweet that? And like, is that going to, how's that going to come back to me? But also like, how's that going to mislead them to not help somebody else the way I think they should be helped? So it's partly it's like an internal shame, and partly it's like, I do feel this urge that I want what I'm doing to be helpful for the people. And if I make a mistake and it ends up not being helpful, then I feel like really discouraged about that.
Do you like being the overseer of your own business, your own ministry, as opposed to working for a church?
My yes and no. So I don't. It'd be really hard for me to work for like a boss that's telling me like you need to be here and do this, do that. Like I like being in control of my time, what I'm doing, my interests, all this stuff. At the same time, like managing an organization stresses me out. Like part of me, my dream scenario would be to have an executive director that basically runs all the nitty-gritty, all this stuff. Like I have no desire to expand it, to grow it, whatever. I just want the freedom to do what I enjoy doing, what I feel like I'm gifted at doing, not worry about all the details. But at the same time, I don't want to be told, all right, 9 to 5, you're coming in, you're doing this. I'm like, no, what if I don't want to come in at 9? What if I want to come in at 5?
Right.
So it's a hard balance. I love being kind of my own boss. At the same time, it does stress me out in ways that I'm like, somebody else take this over, I'd be fine as long as I get to do what I want to do.
Right.
Which is hard. You can't. It's almost like, well, you got to pick one or the other. You can't have it both ways.
All of your answers point towards the same type in my mind, so I'm just going to jump in and just tell me if this sounds right to you. So one of the types is the one. The one is the reformer. Ones are natural teachers. Ones are idealists who seek a world where everything is as it should be. Very aware of when things are wrong or flawed. They want to make them better. Ones naturally improve things. So for the spaces that ones care about, they will naturally see this is how this could get a little bit better. The telltale sign for ones is that they have what many will describe as an inner critic. It's almost like a voice in their head saying, this is where you messed up. And so that's my type as well. And really? I would, and as I was thinking through just what I'm familiar with in your work, I would have guessed a 1 or a 3. just depending on why you do what you do. Is it the case, for example, that you jump into these hard questions, violence, sexuality, hell? Are you jumping into those because you're getting attention from the church, or are you jumping into those because you want to move the church a little bit further in their thinking and their sanctification? You know what I mean?
That's clear to me. It's totally the latter. Like, if I never was on stage to speak again, I would be a happy camper. Not only do I not need or want a platform, to me, it's like, it just stresses me out. I'd rather sit in my basement and, change the world for, without like somebody else take the credit. I could care less,
So ones are going to be generally systematic thinkers.
Yeah.
That is, will spend a ton of time on the systems, because the systems, ones actually, so I'm a one also, I teach philosophy, but ones are thinking repressed. That is, ones feel things really strongly, and then their head catches up later. And so systems are real helpful, because there's like, well, if I get the right system, then I can have a mental map of the things that are most important so that I don't mess things up.
So, go ahead.
And anyway, that's how I navigate the world. And this is probably why you and I, when we converse about things, which, by the way, for you podcast listeners, Preston and I have the best material on talking about the ethics of queer sexuality that is out there. I have looked at it all. Ours is the best. But you and I are real interested in getting this question right. Mm-hmm. And we are motivated to get it right. Mm-hmm. We're more than happy to be proven wrong, but we're creating a system whereby we can think about what healthy sexuality looks like.
So,
and that's...
I was going to say that the reason why I thought it was a 5 from the little I know is that I'm hyper just analytical. And as far as my own self introspection.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm led by emotion. Like, I'm one of the few people who believe in annihilation. That it's not really like, if ECT, if God wants to torment people forever and ever, then so be it. Like, it really doesn't, almost to a fault, like, bother me.
Yep.
Because that's what God said. That's what God said. That's, like my grandma said, God said it. I believe it. That settles it. Like, I resonate with that kind of God's God, I'm not. What are the facts? Just show me the facts. Give me the evidence, and I'll go where that leads. At least that's by how I think I'm thinking. So isn't that more of a 5 than a 1? Like, I don't feel like I'm leading.
It can be. 1s and 5s are real similar on this front. 1s, 3s, and 5s will all shut down their emotions in order to solve problems.
Yes.
1s are going to focus on what is right to do or believe. 5s are going to say, what is the data? And those are slightly different. But one is going to be very principled, and one's going to be very evidential. And they do it out of different motives. The one wants to not feel spoiled inside, doesn't want to be corrupted by bad thinking. That's not what the 5 wants. The 5 wants security and wants to feel safe. If I have the right information, then I will be secure and have the resources I need to be comfortable in the word. That's what a 5 would think.
Interesting. So there's an overlap there. Yes, some differences.
5s, 1s will want to try to convince people of their view. Okay. 5s will want to disturb people with data. 1s can be very practical in their thinking. This is what this means for us behavior-wise. 5s can often be very impractical. They can go down the rabbit trail of, very nuanced issues that just don't have any practicality.
So I can resonate with both those, really.
Do you find yourself you're thinking more of a judgmental thinking or non-judgmental thinking?
Yeah, I'm trying to be really honest. I think it's non-judgmental. Like, I try to, like, if I disagree with somebody, I want to work hard to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if I sense a genuine quest on their part, then I'm fine with the disagreement. Like, I don't need to convince them of my view. If I do get frustrated when I feel like they don't have good reasons for holding to their view or whatever, or if they're not willing to kind of look at the evidence or the truth, if they're, don't have good reasons for their view, even then I don't need to convince them. I don't feel like at all costs I'm going to keep going. I'm like, but I just like get more annoyed than anything. I don't feel like I judge I don't think it's a judgmental. Like, I don't know if I resonated with the one being high on, like, this is the right thing to do. That sounds bad, right? Of course, I should be, but
No, I mean,
to me, the almost.
by the way, that was just contradictory right there. You should...
Yes. Oh, that's so funny. God.
Let me tell you some stuff. Let me tell you some stuff about fives. It may be the case here. Again, I can't tell you what color your glasses are.
Right.
So
Okay.
that would be a big part of this. Fives are going to withdraw for security. They're going to be very aware of what they possess because their possessions will make them safe. So fives are going to struggle naturally with greed and hoarding. They're going to be thinking about resources quite a bit. Fives are going to hoard knowledge in particular and that's why data matters. Data will keep you safe, especially when it's divorced from your interpretations, as it were. The fives will struggle to get into their body's their action repressed, where ones are thinking repressed. That is, the last thing for a five is to engage their body with the knowledge they have.
What does that mean? Engage your body with? I don't understand that.
Some types, fours, fives, and nines will all come across as slightly lazy, because for different reasons. But the fives in particular will oftentimes struggle with thinking about themselves because they're always thinking about the world out there. But they know what to do. Fives often know what to do, but just have a hard time starting the process of doing it.
That's right, because they're constantly just thinking. They can't actually launch out until they have all the data. Kind of. Yeah, that's not me. Yeah, no, I know that personality type from other tests and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm the type of person that, like, when a book is like 80% there, like, or a blog, it's like, let's get it out there, move on to something else.
Yeah.
I've done enough research, whatever. So I wouldn't resonate with the five there. Where I do feel like I resonate with what you said is, and this maybe deals with the shame piece, and maybe this would make me a one. I don't know. Like, if I'm dealing publicly with a controversial issue, I'm so, like, go out of my way to try to get every single fact straight so that when I articulate my view, there's no chance that somebody's going to say something I haven't thought of, or sort of even maybe shame me, like, in the moment. We're like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that. And everybody's like, how do you not think about that? Like, I want to think about everything before I even go public. So there is that thoroughness in that sense. And yet, but then, like I just said, like, sometimes I'll write a blog where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably 80% sure of this. Let's get it out there, stir the pot a little bit. So I don't know.
It's going to come back to motive on that front. Is it because you don't want to be spoiled or seen as a bad thinker? Or is it fives, their motive for scholarship is going to be different. Fives are going to want to cover their bases so that they can occupy the space they want to occupy and feel, and feel safe given the knowledge that they have.
I don't know. I have to think about the safety. When you've said that a few times, feel safe with the knowledge. I'm not sure if that's me or not. It might be, it might not be. I'd have to, like, really think about it. Maybe that reveals my type, that I need to really think about it.
That's something I say all the time on exactly that front. It's because it's not just immediate. I'm
not a good identifier of my emotions and everything. Like, I need somebody else to kind of really draw out these things. I'm not very in touch with myself.
Really, talk about that. Like, what would be an example of emotions that you don't feel like you're in touch with?
I don't know. Like, my wife's a big feeler, and so whenever she asks me, like, well, how do you feel about that? How do you, whatever, like, what's going on inside? I'm like, I don't even know how to. I don't know. I have something due by 5:00, and I'm going to get it done, and there's bills to pay, and the facts of needing to get stuff done over, like, that just, it's irrelevant how I feel about it, or whether I'm struggling with it or not.
Sure. Is it the case that it's putting language to that is what's
Yeah.
last? But I mean, you feel certain ways. It's just the
Yeah.
articulating
I
how
think
you
that,
feel.
yeah. No, and I'm not ashamed. I'm free. I'll talk about my emotions. I just don't know what questions to ask or what, but if someone can draw it out, I'm happy to lay it out
Yep.
and try to be honest with it.
Just everything you're saying strikes me as one-ish material. So let me tell you about like myself on that. Like I will overshare about certain things to an uncomfortable point because I don't want there to be something bad inside of me.
Okay.
If I can put it out here and talk about it, then clearly it's out of me. I've confessed it. We're all aware that I may have some defects, but now they're outside. They're out here, and I don't feel bad. Like I don't feel like I'm keeping a secret or something.
Yeah.
So that's real common for me.
Yeah. Like I don't mind talking about my faults if somebody asks me whatever. Like it doesn't. Yeah. Yeah, I think I resonate. I'm trying to, What about extrovert, introvert? Does that play into this, or is that kind of cut across all the numbers? Is that not?
Some of the numbers are more likely to be extroverted than introverted, but it generally cuts across the numbers.
Okay.
So, what do you find for yourself?
Introvert. I'm an introvert who can function as an extrovert, but like I can be by myself in my basement with a stack of books for 2 weeks, and I'd be totally fine.
Yep.
Like quarantine hasn't. It's almost scary that quarantine literally hasn't. Like I haven't even like. There's been no like. It's been great. Like I haven't even apart from the pandemic and all the unknowns and everything. But like person like relationally wise, it's like been great, man. I'm here in my office. I got tons of books behind me and. But then I enjoy this. I've been talking all day to people on Zoom, and I'm energized by it too. But it's like I feel like I can be energized by good conversations, relationships. But if they're not deep and meaningful, I don't need like people around. And even if they are deep and meaningful, I can get by without them. So I don't know.
Yep. That you described my life, right? You and I are the same person. It's just how that's entirely. You can't. Podcast listeners can't see this, but both of us have this enormous bookshelf of books behind us. And by the way, a lot of them are the same books.
Oh, I'm totally right.
I'm seeing the NT Wright section.
Oh
here,
yeah, I see Jesus and the Victory of God. It's so good. Oh, and you got the Baker exegetical. Yeah, I'm admiring. Yeah,
we can talk shop about all the great library that we have.
That's so funny.
You want to hear some good news?
Yes. Give me some good news.
The Apostle Paul is a one.
Is that our segue into the biblical authors?
It could be.
All right. So
I got something for you as a pitch.
Yeah.
You'll know this. It's one of the most important events in the history of the early church. Is the fight between Paul and Peter.
Yeah.
You'll know this from Galatians.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that doesn't appear in Acts, does it? I'm trying to think of that now.
No, not explicitly, but it's kind of like on the eve of the Jerusalem Council or before or after, whatever the debate is.
Yeah. Why Paul gets mad and why Peter takes a big step back from the Gentiles he had been apparently eating with, that's going to come out of motive. Why is it that Paul gets so cranked up is worth talking about. And why is it that Peter feels the need to take this big step back when the entourage from James come? And so one of the things we might talk about there, and this might be a segue into, because you can then start talking about Paul's influence on Luke, Paul's writing of his epistles, and Peter's influence on Mark, and Peter's writing of his own epistles. Their motives come out in that space. Paul's real interested in what is right and what the world should look like, specifically what the church should look like. And he is a very idealistic, and this is a one-ish practice. Paul is a reformer. He's a teacher, wants to embody the goodness of God. And when he sees this thing that's not right, he gets very angry about it. And it's an anger that's a frustrated anger. You talked about that with yourself in basketball a second ago, but the frustrated anger is how baseball, sorry. That's how it materializes for ones. Peter, throughout the Gospels, is a very fearful person.
Yeah.
And sometimes that spills over as cowardice, and sometimes that spills over as reckless. But I would want to type Peter as a 6. 6s are often called the loyalist. They have a radar for all the things that might go wrong. But they have an underlying feeling of fear, and they connect and attach to people who give them safety. And we could talk about Peter in a minute, but it seems to me that this is what's going on in that confrontation, is Peter has attached to his Jewish tradition, to the view of Jesus and his experience of Jesus. And this is a place where things are unstable. Mm-hmm. 6s are really aware of rules, because if they break rules, they're going to lack the stability of the tribe. Paul is real comfortable questioning rules. Are these the right rules? Are these good rules? You can get rid of some rules if they don't line up with the system that's actually in place.
Yeah, that's
and so
me.
when
that's totally me.
There you go. Yeah. So notice how Paul's thinking on circumcision and dietary laws would play into his oneness. It's the big thing, the good thing, the thing that defines the system is Christ crucified. Mm-hmm. And it has an effect on everything, which includes the restrictions that we have. Now, some restrictions may not be applicable anymore. They may have been done away with because of what Jesus has done and accomplished. In fact, what Jesus has done and accomplished on the cross is create a whole new world where everything is as it should be. And the idealistic side of Paul comes out there. Peter's not an idealist. Peter is never pitching ideals in that way. Peter is telling us how to wrestle with our fears in his epistles. It's like, you guys are suffering. Let's walk through how we are attached to Jesus the Lord over creation. And in this situation, both Paul is coming out with anger, Peter is coming out with fear, and that may be a description of what's going on in that, in Paul's telling of that confrontation. Long story short, when reading the Bible, this may be a great tool for understanding what's going on in the hearts and minds of the authors and the characters involved.
Yeah, keep going, because this is fascinating. Because I mean, when you were describing Peter and Paul, from what I know about them in the Gospels and the letters, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this clearly makes sense. And even when they clash, helps us to understand why they clash and how they clash, and why Peter he withdrew from meeting the Gentiles out of fear for the circumcision party, right? So there's that fear piece.
Yep.
And Paul does seem, I'm trying to think right now, he does seem to be principally driven, and yet it must fit into the system if it doesn't make sense. Can you give us an example of where he would maybe be like, yeah, that's a stupid rule, like
it's all over the place in terms of critiquing the Judaizers. Mm-hmm. Is real easy and natural for Paul. Your rules just don't work. Okay. Or critiquing Roman culture. So Romans 1, he's going to say, here's all the things that are super dysfunctional about your society. Right. And it's just judgment just comes real naturally to him in terms of here's where things are spoiled in your culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Or in 1 Corinthians, he's like this. I love you all. You guys are my brothers and sisters. Let me tell you where things are just not going right. Yeah. And that would naturally be the heart of it. Ones are going to be that teacher sanctifying spirit. I want you to get better. Specifically, I want you to get better morally. And that's just all Paul's writings. It's let me tell you the system, and here's what you should do about it.
And what about the whole, he's very aware of his own sin. I mean, in his last letter, I'm the chief of all, or second to last, whatever, chief of all sinners. When I read that, I'm like, oh, I totally resonate with that. Like, the older I get, the more I'm like, am I even a Christian anymore? Just that constant self-criticism.
The stuff in Romans, I want to say Romans 6 and 7, mm-hmm. The why do I do the things I don't want to do kind of stuff, it's his anger at himself is going to come out frequently. I think you're right. I'm the worst of sinners. What I beat my body, I make it a slave. That's the kind of language that would come out of a 1. I want to be morally as good as possible. And this is where his theology comes into play. And what this is, here's the thing I really wanted to pitch to you and see what you thought about this. His articulation of the gospel comes out of his oneness, because he realizes he can't get to the perfection, to the idealistic standards he has for himself morally. That pushes him to understand the cross in a certain light. And when he realizes I can't get there on my own, that is where his theories of justification really come to the surface. And it's like, but Jesus Christ has done this for me, and therefore I am good. And that's what ones need to hear more than anything else. Ones need to hear from the living God, you are good. And you just see that all over Paul's writings when he's really connecting with that message. That's not necessarily what the other types need to hear, but you see that a lot with Paul. By the way, I would argue that Martin Luther is also a 1, and I would argue that John Calvin is probably a 1 as well. And that message from Paul, they discover that message, and Paul elevate it and create a reformation out of it.
So do you think that certain personality types are drawn to certain biblical authors, certain portions of scripture that have the same lens on that they do? They're like, oh, I totally resonate with that way of seeing the world.
Absolutely. So I bet you're a Pauline scholar, yeah?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not even consciously aware of the possible like subconscious resonance I had with Paul. For me, it was more just like I don't know. I was really wanted to figure out the question of Paul and the law, and wanted to. So I don't know. But I do resonate when you're highlighting the different clear one kind of personality traits of Paul. I am like, oh yeah, I totally resonate with that. Like the chief of all sinners, and just the kind of like I'll totally uphold a rule as long as it kind of makes sense and fits into this Christocentric system. What about Romans 13? Obey governing authorities. Like that doesn't feel very one-ish, does it? I mean, there's so many things going on there, but I mean, that's a classic text of like Paul just was like patriotic and submitting to Rome and all this stuff.
Having listened to your podcast here recently as I was prepping for this, I've realized that you're very interested right now in how should you navigate government and theology in this very, chaotic time. I find myself getting into way more discussions, fights, arguments than I ever have at this point in time. And I imagine it's the case that Romans 13 follows cleanly out of that. Have you seen Scott McKnight's book on Romans that he just put out, Reading Romans Backwards?
No. I need to check it out.
It's really good.
Okay.
He says if you read Romans backwards, 16, it's a different book. You see the issues that Paul is actually seeking to highlight. Anyway, but one of them is how do we? He's obviously writing to the church in Rome.
Right.
So to the church in Washington D.C. who serves under this government, how should you think about the government? And his pitch in 13 is Jesus is Lord. That's the whole point of Romans 1. And it's the point of Romans 8 is the true Lord is the Lord Jesus. And therefore feel free to obey the authorities because they serve at the command of the living Christ who is resurrected. I think that's how I would think about that. Totally. But he has a system for getting there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. 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 Like for me, like I don't know. There's many examples I can get. Like, so I live in Boise. Most of you guys know, and we have first of all the worst not traffic, but like the worst driving rules. Like these wide open country roads, the speed limit's like 35 miles an hour. And when you're on a wide open country road, you feel like you're walking. I'm like, this is a stupid speed limit. I'm going to go 50, 55 because that's how fast you should be going. This doesn't make any sense. that a 4-lane road with no, I'm going to go 35, like how much time I'm going to waste, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like but then there's other rules where I'm like, yeah, that actually makes sense. There's barbed wire. Somebody paid for this property. Don't trespass. I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, whatever. Other ones are like, well, who even lives here? Like, why can't I go walk there? I'm just going on a hike.
This would be a one-ish thing. You don't want rules that will control you that are dumb.
Exactly.
That aren't good rules.
And this is okay. So this is why maybe my ongoing, maybe. I'll pitch myself in good light here. My holy discontent with the way we do church.
Yes.
Okay. How's that? Instead of like a grumpy, churchgoer. But like a lot of time, I'm constantly asking, why this, why that? What is this producing? Does this affecting the mission or discipleship? We spent this much money on that. Well, okay, show me how that's the most effective way to spend money. If you can't show it to me, then I'm not going to be really motivated to give to that or even like be excited about that. So when you have layers of that stuff going on at church, it's kind of like constantly kind of frustrating. We're singing this worship set and nobody's singing. Nobody seems to be into it. So either it's your problem, it's the people's problem. Either way, like we're just going to sit here and stare forward while people sing. And like, there's a problem here. Let's fix it,
The ones, here's the big thing. Like ones want to embody the wholeness, the goodness of God. That is our image bearingness. All the Enneagram types bear the image of God in different ways. In my mind, you have a natural gift to see things improved, to see things made better. Mm-hmm. And that is how you reflect God in the world. Something that we all need more ones in our life that are healthy, that can actually have a radar for, I'm not sure that this is good. Here's how it could be better.
Okay.
It's a great gift to the church, to the world.
I'm all excited now, but I need to, so I want to know a couple of things. So what do I have a wing? Aren't there wings? And also, what's an unhealthy one? Like what are my unhealthy patterns I need to be aware of?
Yeah. Wings are just part of the Enneagram. If you were to look at the symbol, that's like the thing that people think is a satanic symbol, but it's just a bunch of lines.
Yeah.
Or a Rush album. Your number is, you're right.
2112.
Each of the numbers is next to another number. Ones are next to 2s and 9s. And what all it means is to get balance in your life, you can often push into one side or the other. So you're idealistic about how things should be, but sometimes you push towards your 9 side, which is a peacemaker side. You're going to pacify your need to make everything perfect right now. That can be one way that you balance your primary motive in addiction. On the other side, ones can become very self-focused and like this needs to be exactly this way and other people's feelings and emotions be damned. But you'll realize that doesn't get you what you want. And sometimes you'll push towards your 2. 2s are the helper and they're very aware of the feelings of other people. And so sometimes you might push that way. Wings are about balance. You should imagine a bird.
That's fascinating because when you're describing the 9, I'm like, oh yeah, I could tend to like the peacemaker. I'm like, I do resonate with the peacemaker. Like I hate confrontation. I am unity. Like especially when and this, for good or for ill, in my work in the sexuality conversation, I feel like when I'm like I want to see the kind of good in other different viewpoints or whatever, and then you meet somebody. I mean, you and I are on different pages on this, and look at us. And you would probably hardly even tell because I know you as a person, and I, value everything you say. And so and the 2, what did you say? You said something about the 2 that. What did you say about the 2 wing that really resonated with whatever?
2s are helpers.
Oh yeah.
And they naturally want to embody the love of God, and they are very focused on the feelings and emotions of others. Ones, if they're perfectionistic, can get no, this is the system and how it needs to be. But you'll realize that doesn't work and get you what you want all the time. You need to push into the emotional life of others, and that that wing can be helpful there.
So I could resonate with that. There are times when I'm like, I'm just so oblivious and could care less about the emotions of others, and other times when I'm like so overwhelmed, like I'm like so in tune that they just like, helping somebody, or if somebody's is suffering or not feeling well or feels persecuted or oppressed, that really energizes me to help fix that. But then other times I'm like, I can cut myself off from emotions of others.
You used a buzzword for ones. It's the fix. Ones want to fix things, and you'll have a natural radar for this could be better.
Okay.
This could be improved. This could be, but it shows you to be a quality person if you are able to empathize with the people around you. Really unhealthy ones can get their project, their thing. Calvin is a good example of this. Here's the thing that I want to create. I'll burn some people to get there. At his worst, there might be all sorts of great things about Calvin and Calvin's thought. Nobody, everybody's got a shadow, and that comes out in unhealthy ways at times. But that's an extreme example of that. Hitler's probably a one. He wants to have a perfect race. He wants to have a perfect country, and we need to eliminate all those people who spoil that vision. And that's a deeply toxic way of expressing his reformer perfectionist side into the world.
What's the tradition like when you think of like type A personality, or on the DISC profile, the high D, the dominance, the need to lead? They like to confront but can't stand to be confronted. What number is that personality? Is that fit one number?
Yeah, a lot of 8s are of that sort. 8s. My oldest child is an 8, and the not wanting to be controlled means often that their 8's anger, where 1's anger goes inward, 8's anger goes outward, and they create boundaries. They navigate the world and understand the world by really pushing hard into the world.
Okay.
And so it'd be something like that.
So on the Twitter feed, some people said a lot of people said Paul's an 8. I don't know if you saw the.
Yep.
So you would say.
Yeah. Well, I would say it again. This is where things get tricky. Is you can't judge somebody or figure out somebody's type based on behavior, but all we have is kind of their behavior and words and their own self-understanding and expression. Stuff that I don't see in Paul is let me think about this. 8s. Let's talk about 8s. Actually, let me tell you a Bible writer who I think is an 8, and then we could discuss how they might be different. I think the Isaiah, or specifically 2nd Isaiah. How do you say this? Deutero Isaiah. Do you get into that material?
Isaiah,
yeah.
2nd Isaiah.
So the writer of Isaiah 40 through 63 strikes me as an 8. Very aware of power dynamics. 8s long to embody the strength of God. 8s have an underlying feeling of anger, like I said, that goes outwards. They do not want to be controlled. So much of Isaiah, the backside of Isaiah, is about how Israel's going to be liberated. And that is coming out of the heart of this writer. And so right from the beginning in Isaiah 40, every valley it's going to be raised up, and the mountains are going to be made low, and the sovereign Lord is going to come with power, and his arm is going to rule. That's the voice of an 8. Very justice-oriented. Very, the princes of this world are going to be brought to nothing. The Lord Yahweh sits, enthroned above the circle of the earth, and everyone else is a grasshopper. Very aware of power dynamics. And you'll notice how Isaiah 40 ends. It's with the weary and those who lack strength being, they're going to increase their power. He's going to bind up. What is it? You're going to run on wings like eagles. What is I need to go watch Chariots of Fire again.
Yeah, run. Run with. Now you screwed me up. At the end of Isaiah 4, I think 40:26, whatever.
The big thing where ones need to hear you are good, 8s need to hear I will not betray you. And they specifically need to hear that from God. And when you read Isaiah, that's what you see.
Interesting.
You see a God who is not going to betray you, and Isaiah is even going to picture that God as a suffering servant. He's going to picture that God as, as Yahweh, who is going to see heaven and earth overlap, and that it's you should. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of William Barber, but he strikes me as an 8 who is this kind of he does the Poor People's Campaign. He's a very justice-minded. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. is probably an 8. Very justice-minded, very angry at systems of oppression kind of personality.
Okay.
And it seems to me that, Isaiah comes out as that kind of person.
Interesting. Okay. Now, okay, I have to give voice to what I'm sure some listeners, maybe a lot of listeners, are thinking. They're like, isn't this God's word? Like, doesn't the Holy Spirit kind of override this stuff? Like, why are we?
Yeah.
So let's talk more like just inspiration and the divine quality of Scripture and how that works into this. Are we overplaying the human quality?
So I want to ask you that question, because you're gonna be more studied on this than me. Paul is a first century Jew.
Yeah.
Paul is a male. Yeah. Paul studies under Gamaliel.
Yeah.
Is going to have a background. Does that influence anything that Paul writes?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm trying to give voice to that, but I am definitely, especially as people that are more like biblical studies people instead of like maybe systematicians. So I'm more of a biblical studies guy. Like I do tend to maybe not, I don't think emphasize to a fault. I think just rightly try to honor the humanity of the biblical authors when we're interpreting their letters, where my sort of presupposition of inspiration or infallibility or whatever might come into play is I don't think that there's going to be just blatant contradictions between, say, Jesus and Paul, even though I'm fine with some really strong tensions, or even like James and Paul. To me, like, James said something as close as you can almost get to a contradiction. I think there's an explanation. I think there's more cohesion than maybe some people would say, but I'm fine with. I don't need to iron it out. Like I think they had very different emphases, and same with there's a reason why Protestants resonate with Paul's letters and Catholics resonate with the Gospels, and I like that. I think it's fine to say that, if Matthew and Paul sat down in a theological conversation, it's not like they'd just be crossing each other's T's and dotting each other's I's. Like they might be wrestling with stuff, clearly there's distinct personalities, even Jew Gentile stuff that goes into it. And yes, I do think the maleness of the writers doesn't mean they're all misogynist, whatever, but I think that did bring a perspective. So, I think it's, I guess my only concern would be, like you said, it's like the Enneagram or even personality tests. We have such limited data to go on. I mean, it's like we're going off of, even Paul, we probably have the most. Let's assume that Luke's portrait of Paul is accurate in the book of Acts. In scholarship, that's widely debated.
Okay.
So let's just assume it's totally accurate. We've got the book of Acts and 13 letters of Paul. And let's assume Pauline authorship of all 13 letters. We still don't have much to go on. I mean, what if some people took 13 emails from Jeff Cook, and
sure.
And a biography that would take, a couple hours to read? It's like, well, that's a snapshot of my life. You're trying to tell me who I am based on a tiny glimpse of a few emails and, a tiny portion of my life through the lens of somebody else, So I think our data is really limited. At the same time, everything you said, it does seem to fall into place based on the data we do have. So I think it's worth, I think it's a worthy thing to explore, You
mentioned something, and this would be the big thing for me on this as a philosopher. Presuppositions matter. And if you can just come in and say, here's my presuppositions, this is just what I'm assuming in order to get the ball rolling. And this might be helpful on the backside or not. But I like saying, if I presuppose this type for Moses, if I presuppose this type for Peter, notice some of the stuff you can do with that. And it can be fun.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it necessarily would alter Well, let me think. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Would it alter a previously held interpretation of Paul if we had a better understanding of his personality type, or would it just maybe help us get a full, maybe a full understanding of what he was saying? Or, for instance,
Yeah.
like the confrontation between he and Peter. If we just see that in black and white without even considering different personality types, we're going to read that passage in that situation slightly differently. We're going to absorb it differently, maybe, and even maybe apply it differently than if we understand these are probably two personality types and there's a reason why each one did what they did. I don't know.
Yeah. What's been helpful for me is naming the good that each type brings into the world can be real valuable in looking for the value of what the book is, what the text is. So, for example, my wife is a 3. 3s are often called the achiever. They're very focused on excellence, and they embody the glory of God. They're fantastic leaders. They demand attention in their way of engaging the world. But some of the best leaders that we have end up being 3s who are able to elevate everyone else into wonderful, worthwhile collective identity and vision. And if I see that in one of the writers and I can name that can be real valuable in saying this is coming out of the heart of a 3 and look at the beauties here. Anyway,
that's super helpful. Especially if you're one who maybe struggles with certain biblical writers. Like I know some people really struggle with Paul, right?
Yes. And I think they struggle with Paul on exactly the place that most people struggle with ones.
That's so good.
He's so self-righteous. He is so concerned with what is right and wrong. He's so black and white. These are common problems for ones.
Okay.
In terms of, because that's how we navigate the world. We don't want to be spoiled. We have a fear of being corrupt inside. And so we want to be right. And that comes out in our defensiveness. That comes out in how we judge ourselves. And often that judgmentalism can spill over. That's the negative. On the positive side, as a 1 myself, when I read 2 Corinthians, especially as a 1 pastor, 2 Corinthians is my thought life.
Yeah.
It is, I have done so much for you all, and you don't get it. Yeah. Let me give you the list of all my achievements and why you should respect me more than you do. And it's real helpful for me to read 2 Corinthians and say, this person who I really admire felt the same way I did. That might be a good way to think about how the Enneagram is used practically here. Because I see, what do you think about that? I'm real curious.
No, that's fascinating. As a newly discovered 1, I could resonate with what you're saying about 2 Corinthians. Well, okay. So some people, I have been called a 3 and more recently a 5. Based on, I don't want to say a lot. I think some early online tests that I took said I was a 3, because I like to. The example I always give is if I wake up in the morning and have a to-do list, it is like candy to finish the day checking off that last one. Like I feel like I was productive today. That's probably characteristic of 3s, right? But I think the motivation, when you talk about the motivation, it's because I want to be praised for it. It's like, no one needs to know about it. Like it's myself. Like I want to know that I was productive today. So I don't.
It's why does it make you feel good?
Right.
3s, if 3s didn't get to share their checklist with, and so this is real common in my house. My wife shows me her checklist all the time. A wonderful activity for 3s who gain their value from the attention of others is to go on a walk by themselves without their phone. And the without your phone is really important because you can't take a picture of your walk to show everybody else where you went and how the solitude was amazing, because that's an accomplishment and you're trying to get your value from the opinions of others. Whereas 1s get their value from what they do. Achievements it's not, I don't need other people to know about my achievements, but I need to do things that make me feel as though I'm good and responsible in bringing health to the
I
world.
resonate more with that. Like, I don't need. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question that might be even some people might, I don't know, heretical, but like they might be offended at the very question. What is Jesus?
Jesus. So I will give you the heretical answer because I'm on an island on this one, but I feel like I got a strong case. The common wisdom on this is that Jesus is all the types. This comes out of Richard Rohr's work. Okay. Richard Rohr did the first real work on Enneagram for, contemporary Christians. His book, The Enneagram, the subtitle is A Christian Perspective. It's really a great book. And the end of that, he wants to show how the divine embodied in Jesus, reflects all the types. I generally go against this because I have the intuition that Jesus was a male, circumcised on the 8th day. Again, a first century Jew, born in a certain place, died at a certain time. There is something about the incarnation that matters in terms of he is a person just like us. Mm-hmm. And so I have a strong intuition that Jesus has a type, and I think it's really obvious if you can go there that Jesus has a type. I think his type emerges immediately.
Okay, so before you give your answer to that, I would agree with you. Just when you said, that Jesus is embodying the divine, yada yada, I'm like, whoa, hold on, 100% divine, but 100% human. Like, what does it mean to be 100% human? It means to have. I guess you could argue all of them based on he's the perfect human, but he's also a real human. He wept, he cried, he whatever. Like I'm perfectly fine, even through the lens of Nicaea, for having, because of Jesus' humanity, which was the biggest deal in the early church. The first heresy wasn't denying his divinity; it was denying his humanity. So I'm huge on the side of, I think sometimes we so diminish his humanity that I love exploring ways in which he was maybe more human than we recognize. So I'm totally on board with you. What do you think his?
Let me actually build slightly more on what you just said, because I think that's spot on. The typing Jesus doesn't mean that Jesus' type is better than all the others. Typing Jesus says, what does it look like for this type to be at its absolute best?
Okay.
And I can apply that to me as well. How is it that Jesus navigates the sins that Jesus struggles with, the underlying feelings that Jesus struggles with, that Jesus clearly is tempted? We're shown that in bold letters. Yeah. This is how the devil tempts Jesus. I'll say it in a second here, but the temptations are all the temptations of one of the types. They all target the same thing. They all target avoidance of pain, and one of the types really struggles with avoidance of pain.
Okay.
So turn these stones into bread. You don't need to suffer anymore. Kneel before me. You don't need to suffer in order to gain the world. I know that's what you want. Throw yourself down from this high place. Everybody will know who you are. You don't need to go to the cross. Come down from that cross is the fourth temptation. It's said when he's on the cross. Take this cup from me. It's all about pain. So let's talk about sevens.
Dang it, he's not a 1? I was hoping he'd be a 1, but then you said Hitler's a 1, so that's not good. So.
On the flip side, Gandhi's probably a 1. It just shows you how ones have just dramatic. It's the thing from C.S. Lewis that a dog can only be so good and so evil, but an angel can be amazing or world destroying.
Yeah.
So we're in good company. That's it. You should take.
Okay. I'll take Gandhi. Not Jesus, but Gandhi.
Yeah, go with Gandhi.
So 7. All right, keep going. And you're gonna hang yourself.
So here's you should text. So my Twitter handle is Jeff V Cook. if you got thoughts on this. Sevens are the adventurer, the entertaining optimist. Sevens long to embody the joy of God and offer that joy to others. Sevens don't want to be stuck, very much on the move. Mm-hmm. That might describe Jesus. They have an underlying feeling of fear And the way that they avoid fear is they move from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. They create exciting opportunities for others. Sevens are routinely seen as fantastic storytellers. Sevens are pain avoiders. Again, all three temptations seem to me to point towards avoiding pain for Jesus. Sevens can struggle with gluttony, or that would be their deadly sin that's often paired with them. And Jesus is known as somebody who routinely is partying. He's eating with people, drinking with people. Not that he is a glutton, but the party-going personality, I'm going to go to the next thing. I'm going to go do the next thing, is very much part of this person, of Jesus' character. The sevens have monkey mind. They're jumping from here to here to here to here very quickly. And if you read the Sermon on the Mount and it's 40 different illustrations, that might be a reason to think of Jesus as a seven. You're going to like this. Having written a book on grace.
Yeah.
I have not said this to anyone, but it routinely hits me. The healthiest sevens, I want to say their title should be something like priest. Ones should be sanctifiers. Twos are lovers. Sevens are priests. The thing about priests is they are offering light from heaven to others. That's the role of a priest. Is I'm going to break open the windows of heaven and let the light shine in. Sevens want to embody the joy of God, and joy, as you will know, in Greek is the word charis. And what Jesus as a priest does is he offers the good joy. He offers the good grace. He offers the Eucharist to everyone else as a priest. That strikes me as...
So my wife is a hardcore seven, so she's going to like it.
Really?
Except for the gluttony thing. She's the opposite. Okay. And she doesn't like...
That can be...
Is that totally fit? I mean, everything you said about seven is off the chart. My wife, not even a question. But the struggle with indulging desires, she's the opposite. She would make a fine aesthetic.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so that can be the case. Sevens can also go very much they can be very aware of their gluttonousness and go towards sobriety as their posture into the world.
She has definitely a partier, but we're very clear, won't cross that line. I mean, we just take alcohol, for instance. She'll have a glass of wine maybe once a week, twice a week, but she would feel so guilty if she took an extra sip that she shouldn't have, or even indulge in, even eating a dessert. She's fine eating a couple bites and saying it's best not to eat enough, or she doesn't even really crave it even. So it actually might be more of a biological thing with her, where she can go all day without eating and won't even realize it. For me, I'm I live for the next meal. Already right now, I can't wait for lunch. I'm already planning dinner. I'm kind of thinking, tomorrow, should I do intermittent fasting or should I just have a big breakfast? I think about food all the time.
Do you think that she's a pain avoider? Will she have difficult time resting in dark emotions?
She's a psychological pain avoider. Something would be very fearful of that. I think the thought of, I guess it would be any parent, but losing a kid or something, or any kind of emotional pain or a relationship that goes bad is deeply, deeply hurt. But as far as physical pain, she's not. She has a really high pain tolerance. If she really gets hurt, slices her finger, you probably won't hear it. She'll be just but yeah, emotional, relational pain, very, very, very sensitive to that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you, here would be a difference between the seven who's closest to me. We, is a pastor buddy of mine, and we are routinely talking about politics, and how we engage politics is real interesting right now. He is looking for every happy, good story. This is going to be over soon. That's out there. That's all he wants to talk to me about. And I just want to say, no, that's not the right way to think about this. Thousands of people are going to die. And our conversation just revolves around that. So I don't know if has this been real hard for her, this season of being inside?
Yeah, harder than on me. Yeah, because she is a partier, she is a people person. She likes to be out doing stuff, but it's kind of there's various levels to it. But I mean, definitely the moving from thing to thing adventure, I'm wired a little bit that way. I probably can stay longer somewhere, but I know for her it's like, let's build something, and once it's done, let's move on to something else. Let's go, let's do it. She wants to travel the world, and storyteller. When she reads, when I hear her reading to the kids, she's just like acting it out. Like loves to like entertain. Yeah. Yeah, and she's taking the test, and they all line up 7, like the party area.
Perfect. Well, so I'll be curious on this in terms of like seeing Jesus as a 7. What you'll see is, this was another question I had for you. Paul's vision of the kingdom of God and Jesus' vision of the kingdom of God, I think, are expressed differently.
Okay.
And they come out of their type. The kingdom of God for Jesus is routinely a party. It's routinely, the world is now in a state of celebration. Whereas for Paul, it seems like the kingdom of God ends up being the world is made whole. The world is, it's made right. And there's nothing wrong with either of those visions. Yeah. They're communicating the beauties of the God they see or embody. They're communicating the truths about God through their type, and it's influencing how they communicate. Anyway, that was I was hoping for your thoughts on that in terms of I don't know if that works.
I'd have to think about that a little bit. I don't know. What about the whole Jesus and judgment though? Because you do have him to a certain crowd though, right? The Pharisees,
absolutely,
the religious hypocrites.
Yep.
But he isn't, because some of you. Are 7s more optimistic than pessimistic? That'd be my first question. Secondly, I do see kind of maybe a blend of both in Jesus and his message. Yeah,
I think so. The scribes and Pharisees want to keep us stuck in this way of understanding God and God's work, and that's just unacceptable. God is loose and alive, and he's going into all the places that you haven't even considered yet. Yeah. Let me show you this person over here who's who's a Samaritan, and let me tell you about how the Holy Spirit is just alive in this person. Wow. That strikes me as a 7ly way to think about things. It's like I think your laws and tradition are places of stagnation, and that's the one thing 7s hate. Yeah. They do not want to be stuck. They're moving to the next thing. This also comes out like when the people come around and they're like, "We want you to be king. We're gonna keep you here, and this is gonna be the place that you stay." That would be, Jesus as a 7 is gonna. No, that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna leave immediately. Yeah. And the movement of Jesus of him going to the next thing, just all over that character.
I could see where even talking about this and exploring it could be troubling for some people, and I don't know, we're the type of personality, I guess, that we like thinking out loud, exploring things. It's like, hey, there's no threat here. We're not saying this is written in stone, but there's just some interesting things here to kind of like explore. But I could see where, I think a lot of, let's say, modern evangelical Christians really struggle with the humanity of Christ. So anything that really pushes into that, I think makes people really nervous, because that fear of losing orthodoxy or the slippery slope or whatever.
When Jesus here, let me pitch this to you because I'd be really curious. When Jesus sits down to give the Last Supper, he says, "I have greatly desired to have this dinner with you." Desire is a huge word. In the Buddhist tradition, you're invited to get rid of all desire. But that's not the Christian tradition, apparently. Oh, yeah. I have greatly desired to have this meal with you. There is something about the desires of God that are apparently important to recognize. And that's all the Enneagram is what is your motive? Why does he desire to have this meal with them? And pushing in. So how about this? Is it acceptable to ask the question, why did Jesus greatly desire to have a meal with these guys?
Because if you have an answer, that's what God does.
That's not an answer.
Hey man, we've got over an hour and 20 minutes. This is the longest podcast I've done in a while, but we should wrap things up. Why don't you just tell our audience where they can find your church, the work you've done? I know you have a website still, right? Or do you have a blog? And I know you've written a few books. And
I'm Jeff Cook. I teach at the University of Northern Colorado. You can find my work at everythingnew.org is where I put my printed material. The debate that Preston and I did on sexuality is there. But the work that I'm doing presently on the Enneagram is Around the Circle podcast. And we do deep dives into all of the types. I've done a lot of work on pop culture stuff recently, where we go through Star Wars characters and the MCU. And that's more where I'm testing out my legs on biblical writers in those spheres. It's like, here's some people who are fake. What are they? But it's a fun way to get into the text and interpret the text. And so anyway, Around the Circle podcast is where you can find my Enneagram work.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, hey, Jeff, thanks for being on the show. This is long overdue, man. I'm glad we connected again.
Likewise.
And many blessings on your life and ministry, bro.
And you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, boss.